It is now 5 after 5 p.m. December 14th, 2005. This is the high school administration building. And they are filling out surveys. Uneventful meeting to watch on TV. This meeting will take the recommendations to the board. They will have them ready by January 20th, I believe. To the board. This is an important meeting. There you go. As the board may institute some of the recommendations. And it may include
they didn't number
building decisions. Means they may, the board may vote to close a hospital. You can call the trustees at 728-2400 extension. I'm not sure about the extension right now. 728-2400 and extension. The receptionist can dial the number that goes on trusting for the business.
We're seeing the 5 schools being fixed this right, so we can all get other schools. Whoever's elected.
I have no clue.
What we have to do.
Looks like.
There you go. There you go.
I don't either. I think we need to go ask them for some clarification there. We need Kim to go ask a clarifying question. She's really good at clarifying questions.
They mean alternative. You know, no one's easy. And I think what the
Kim's gonna ask him.
Kim will take care of it for you. Because you're holding the
And this third item, is that the alternative learning high school or is it combined?
I think that's a yes.
It's our interpretation of it. Yes, that's what,
That's what I tried to combine.
they weren't listening to me, they're all so mathematical.
Maybe whether they fall meeting for the administration.
Janet wanted to redo the survey. She wanted to take them, and then they said it was the alternative.
It says will be the alternative.
Me too. And then I had to just quickly do a bunch of hard. But it's like, if we can take care of this, this, and this, we can take care of it.
Actually, I like your idea of taking it. Wait, that was alternative high school. You can't scroll anymore.
That's what she said, there's one.
No, we didn't have that. No, we didn't have that. Our previous didn't say.
It's really smart. We gave it to Smart. Taylor.
This is the high school culture meeting.
Oh, is that right? Who's looking at that too?
People were chosen last year
Is that you're going to do it like the back of your hand, like the back of your hand?
in October 2008. One-year counselors. Some are principals. There are many principals here actually. I think all the principals of our 4 high schools are here. 5 high schools. There are 5 high schools in the County. Tailgate. Big Sky. Sealy Swan. And an alternative high school.
So number 5 is going to be priorities for their remaining.
Maybe you thought that was obvious.
Every one of their tickets on the back is a number. Prior to the dance, the principal goes in and randomly around a set of numbers. Those kids come in with numbers, including the red ones. It's just a lottery. You know, it might be Italian, I know, but this was, city council.
Again, it's the high school district meeting, December 14th, 2005.
I knew that, yeah, I knew Italian was just gonna go with you. But this was a bigger store than,
There's such a lot of conversation here for the public. The public is to be cut out of this meeting.
no, they know.
No idea.
No, they know. They tell me that everybody's getting.
It's not all 4 years of the kids in someone made a transfer.
Has everybody looked at all 4 of them now?
You don't think you've seen them all?
No, we want
Which one of you not
three.
seen them?
I don't think we've seen 3.
Two more minutes and then we'll sum it up.
Number 3, we should give the following recommendations to the buildings with the most important being devise smaller learning communities and a system to make sure each child is well known. That's number 1. And then the next most important is item number 3, increase emphasis on career technical, and item number 10 is practical transition. And the next most important is establishing some academic fundamentals, item number 4. And then we have to do a second tier. The travel and study all study skills. And then we have a bottom third tier this time of parent councils, cross-curricular That's a pretty good one.
It is. If you saw The rectangular prism I drew yesterday, you'd be thinking that's amazing compared to what I did.
Really?
I get done drawing it and I'm looking at it. Kids are laughing, I'm going.
My topics kids are doing that step stair rating analysis, building towards a tree. That thing. We had one they couldn't, you can tell we're tired of reading it out. And the kid said, just like the steps. Here, it was the most. We'll just start over.
Somebody's got the results. Area 1, remember that was the needs to be addressed. Seemed like there was not much dispute about what the top 3 priorities were. That we really do need to respond to flexible alternatives to meet student needs, and that our teens currently lack that community of supporting adults, and the dropout rate is a concern that really needs to be addressed. Then we have the mid-majors of sort of the stuff that's going on, substance abuse, changing the economy, and then also the need to develop the whole student. And then one group added, there seems to be a clear message that our efforts need to be most focused on those things that deal most directly with students. PR and staff development are a very low priority. I might be inclined to argue that PR and staff development are going very well, so are not a need, and you don't really know why, you know what I'm saying? But in any case, the need that all the data that we've looked at and that the community has taken a look at, that our system is currently not responding to and needs to pay more attention to, is providing more alternatives and somehow paying attention to those kids who need some support in our system. Right? That was probably, anybody else have general comments on that one? Okay. Second one is our own strengths that we currently see ourselves as strong at and don't want to lose track of as we move forward. We value the diversity in offerings that we have. We value our strong college prep focus, and we value having alternative settings for those for whom that strong college prep focus and or something else causes it not to fit, right? The diversity of the 5 schools, it means that some of these strengths are weaknesses at other schools. Diverse electives, for example, the smaller the school, the less able you are to offer those electives. That's a good point. In terms of district-wide strengths, that might not necessarily speak to each setting, but we want to be careful not to lose the diversity that we do have and the strong college program that we have and the respect for the need for alternatives. There? Okay? Number 3, which was what we would tell schools, right? What this committee would say to schools as they, at the school level, we need to devise smaller learning communities and systems to make sure each child is well known. We need to increase the emphasis on career and technical education, support our freshmen in transition, and establish and support academic recovery models. And before I make a statement here, let's make sure that, I'm going to say something that I think is interesting. We kind of flip-flop what should be priorities at the school versus what should be priorities at the district, and that makes sense. Because the district one, with this one I put up, and please don't be offended. But at the district, we said that these things, and possibly one more from down here, need to be district-level priorities. So we agreed in terms of like the top 5 or 6 most important things. It's just that we said district initiative needs to support these things first, so that we can do that at the school. And that makes sense to me, because some of it requires money and choosing to siphon money in different ways, and so the district has to be thinking about that, is what you're saying, I think, or what the survey is saying. There is some dispute about number 6, which is the, what does that one say? Support choice for students. Any comment about that one?
My only observation was 6 was a little vague.
What supporting choice for students looks like?
Yeah, we've got it as a tie, I think, with 15, or the support tech and career education choice for students.
Is it open enrollment, is it class offering?
What kind of choice are we talking about? Well, that's really, so then you're down to the question of whether the survey, which we sort of constructed, not really necessarily intending to construct a survey, but that's whether we stated it the way that we intended to. So anyway, someplace in there, we need to be paying attention to making, and we've said that earlier in some of the things that we knew were needs that needed to be addressed. The question is just in terms of, as a district priority, where is it within the value? And then I think maybe part of why it's confusing to us is what kind of choice are we talking about? So, again, at the district level, if we assume that that choice is somewhere in here, clearly we said the district needs to be paying attention that we've got struggling kids that need resources. And they struggle either to read and or sometimes in the academic recovery after the fact. And then also career and tech ed, we saw through all the stuff that we did, needs to get some attention. The other things, that second tier again, paying attention to each of these things as a second tier. And again, the choice, how that fits in, it's come forward in conversation and in 2 of the other listings, so we can debate how you interpret that one, but we know we got to make sure kids have some choices as part of our, we see that as critical. Okay, so to tell you the truth, as I look at this, as the summary of the work that we've done, when I think about the logical next steps, which is part of what we were going to do today, is take a look at action plans. I kind of think that this summary, if well worded, does a lot of the logical next steps for us. To me, in my opinion, the logical next steps are to say, we've met as a futures committee now for many, many, many times. Buildings, this is what we believe is really important. But first, of course, you present it to the school board and say to the board, this is what has come out as really important. We'd like to direct, or ask you to direct, or have the central administration direct, that buildings pay attention to these things. We'd like some acknowledgement and for people as they make decisions to pay attention to these things and realize that sometimes resources will need to be directed toward the kids that are struggling, towards career and tech ed, towards those kinds of things. So for me, if we present what we have here in summary form to the board, and then if that is also presented at and it doesn't seem significantly out of line with the kinds of things that came out of the community conversation groups either. It seems like you all, even though we invited you to join us late in the process, you did your work sort of separately, we did our work, and when we put people together, the 2 lists don't look markedly different. People are currently synthesizing the community conversations work, and I think we're going to find out the high school pieces of this look fairly similar. The last piece in terms of the one we didn't do as a group is the one that this group needs to do next. Look at number 5, if you would, please, and talk about that for just a minute. It seems to me that we said, that the survey said, that the first thing that we have to do is prioritize these recommendations. And I think, to a large degree, those are prioritized. To a certain, once you've gone to this degree, there's a certain amount of that that's going to be board decision and local school decision anyway. So I have a sense that we have really done a good amount of the work that needs to be done in that regard in terms of prioritizing. People said this is really important, and I'm kind of thinking that we've just done that. We just did number 1. The second thing, and the third thing, this is another one for me that I thought was fairly close, depends on which way you choose to score them. I thought that selecting and designing methods for collecting regular input from all the shareholders needed to be part of what either this group did or this group decided, assigned, made sure that we did on a more frequent basis. Because I think one of the things that we had a sense about as we began our work last year was we had really just that funny exit survey that the community did at graduation, when of course they loved us and not very many of them filled it out. And that was really all that we had in terms of good community input, and we said it's really not very good. Statistically, we can't use it for very much. So we really need to do a better job of that more frequently. And so sure enough, again, we're still saying that. The other one that I think is also equally high, depending on how you score it, is that whole answer the concerns for the staff about the 6-period day, the magnet school, and the common schedule. I'll take a shot at it. You tell me what you think about this particular answer of those concerns. It does not seem to me that a 6-period day responds to what we said about how important choices. At the individual student level, if you only have 6 choices in a day, we are going to less choices rather than more per student. So for me, I would say probably wouldn't be even, unless the board was faced with decisions that were really scary and awful and ugly, I don't think that this committee would say to anyone that the 6-period day is the solution that supports several of the things that we said were critical. That said, I don't think this committee would say that if a school, Willard's, for example, is on a 6-period schedule, if a school decided that in order to get to know students better, so you might have your students for a long period of time, remember we said this was priority 1 for them. If at a school level, they decided that the best way to do what we said a school needed to do was to go to a 6-period day, and they were going to address choice in a different kind of way, then if you're on a 6-period day, it moves around a little bit more often. I'm not exactly sure how that might look, but my sense about that is that we wouldn't recommend that the board or a district level committee dictate that, but we would also not prevent a school like Willard, which currently functions on a 6-period day, from choosing that model. The magnet school piece is a more challenging one for me, and here's why. Magnet school is a weird word, but we've talked about this before. If we don't have enough students that want advanced German courses in each of our schools, but we have enough students that might want advanced German courses to support that on one campus, might we have some places where upper level differences might occur? It seems to me that that responds to choice without saying, at this school you cannot do German, and at this school you cannot do art, and at this school, I don't think, again, at the district level we would do that. But by the same token, if there were enough students at one school to justify a program, and we could allow students from other schools to choose to go over there and could support that choice with our transportation budget, for example, we already run transportation every 2 hours to make ag ed work. So for example, if that level of magneting might be a reality as our enrollment drops. But I don't think that we're going to say that we're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 radically different looking schools directed at a district level to balance that budget, but realistically it might come. The third one on the list was the common schedule thing. And for me, I personally think that that's a critical choice piece, and that's how schools decide how to create their communities and do those kinds of things. So for me personally, now I don't know if that's how the committee wants to respond to that, but for me personally, I don't think that the committee needs to weigh in on a schedule. Now, if the committee doesn't weigh in on enough things, eventually you leave it to the board to weigh in on those things. So you say to the board, we said choice was critical. We said schools had to do this. We said at the district we need to solve this. And you have to constantly drive that message home. An example that I shared at one time earlier is the elementary decision 2 years ago to close some elementary schools and a middle school, actually to move Prescott and Mount Jumbo up to Rattlesnake and close Rattlesnake as a middle school, was a decision largely made because the board heard the elementary staff say, what is critical to us is the middle school program. If you have two ways to cut that $500,000 that you have to fund. You can either close some buildings and keep the middle school program, the 7-period day with exploratories, or you can leave the buildings open, prioritize the neighborhood school concept the way we currently understand it in our community, and therefore your middle schools must turn into junior highs with 6 offerings and no tutors. The educators recommended the first, and the board, again, eventually, with a tremendous amount of difficult work and public input, landed on that choice. So, do I think I don't know how much you feel like you'd like to have, how specific you'd like to be in the form of the recommendations to your board. Because eventually the board can do whatever they want with those recommendations. But realistically, if what you say is, this is what's critical, as you make your decisions, remember that the folks that study this issue across the district, in conjunction with community input and reading the research and all of the stuff that we did, say, this is what's important. This is what you need to let and direct local schools to pay attention to. And these are the things that you have to pay attention to. Perhaps our work is done. However, we didn't answer number 2 for folks, which is, gosh, it might take a while for that to play out. And I don't know how you feel about that. So that's kind of that third thing on the list. And then the fourth thing on the list for me, a lot of those things broke out as follow-up. A lot of people felt like there's some important follow-up that needs to happen. We need to determine what success looks like. So if we say, school A, you can do this, school B, you do your own thing, school C, you do your own thing, we need to assess that we're moving towards smaller learning communities, that kids are well known. Whatever we told schools to do, we need to be sort of holding them accountable for doing that. I hate to use that one a bit more because I'm really editorial about that. But you know what I'm saying? We agreed that needed to happen. We also seem to say that this group needs to, in some form, continue to meet. Because one of the pieces, if you say to schools that they can be different, you must pay attention to these things, but you can be different, is that we need to understand those differences and find out what you're doing that's working well there and doing that kind of thing. So for me, that follow-up is sort of how I grouped a lot of those last things. So that would be my sense about number 5, what this committee needs to do next.
Cheryl?
Yes.
We talked a little bit about this, and I just may be speaking for myself and not my table at all, but on that item number 5, answering the staff concerns, while I agree with your interpretation and how that applies to what we all said as other priorities, I guess when I read this question in the survey, I read it more to mean, we want to know what the board's going to do about that. We aren't making a recommendation to the board that we do or do not adopt a 6-period day, but we want to know now, are you going to tell us we have to do that or not? We want, we can't.
Yeah, and that's that
plans
dance.
if we don't know the
Yeah,
answers to
right.
these questions that we keep
That's
hearing
right.
batted about.
Yeah, and that's that dance between us being asked to make recommendations to the board, but the fact that they are simply recommendations. In the end, some of those big pieces are board decisions. So what we would like for the board to say, maybe at the very least, is we accept the recommendations of the Futures Committee, and that we will prioritize, support these things, blah, blah, blah. But sort of that they always have to be able to reserve judgment. And the funny thing about public education and many other public entities is that our budget is an annual event. And you don't know in advance, and you don't know what the rules are going to be, and all of those kinds of things. So we would love it if the board could definitively say, we will never, ever again do X. Well, first off, who knows what the budget is? And secondly, which of those 11 people are going to be back next year to be on the board? And so those two pieces will forever be there. And I think the greatest work in this is that if internally we have solid agreement about where we agree, agreement about where it's okay to be different, agreement about what you have to do while still remaining different, or while being different. And then, so, I mean, truthfully, I think we said we need to develop some measures to make sure that we are doing the work that we intend to do and that we are being responsive to our public and that kind of thing. I'm not sure. In the end, to tell you the truth, when we got together for the first time last year, I sort of thought that we were going to come out with a bit more specific detail. But as I've engaged in this process, and particularly have been impressed about the smaller learning communities and what our community says about the importance of choice, I just don't have a sense that we're going to dictate it all at the district level. That said, here's the struggle with that is, sameness is cheaper. It just is. And so in the end, the question about choice, the choice is a great one. What kind of choice is the critical choice that has to be supported? And eventually, that's the truth. If the money gets tight, what kinds of choice you're going to support is really where the rubber meets the road. And does this committee want to weigh in on that? For example, if we said that it's cheaper to offer 3, take a look just at the 3 comprehensive large high schools. 3 very similar high schools with fewer offerings at each school than each school currently offers would be cheaper. So would 2 high schools with a breadth and depth of offerings that might even be slightly larger than what we offer now. So if you have 2 high schools of 1,600 versus 3 high schools of 11. Do we want to weigh in on that? That's a choice. Which choice is important? Which choice is important? Choice between 3 different schools and 3 different schedules and 3 different, that end up not being as different because we have to start shrinking? Or 2 schools with greater diversity of offerings? Or maybe they're different. They just are different with smaller, maybe you have 3 kind of magnet or different kinds of choices at the schools as you respond to learning communities. So there's a hard one. Do you want to weigh in on that? Does that seem like something the community ought to decide with the board?
I think this committee was asked to weigh in on it.
Yeah?
Weighing in and making recommendations reflects looking at the research, thinking about it, and giving a perspective on it. It's a suggestion, it's a recommendation, and it's very tangible. And it may be followed or may not, but it's really clear. This is our recommendation. There may be other factors later down the road that we don't know, but this would provide some very tangible direction, A, and B, a framework to make good decisions when it gets there.
Okay. Anybody else?
And like the scenario that you just painted for us, if we do some type of magnet school, then it takes away the community. The kids are transported. Like if I'm at Big Sky in the morning, I'm going to leave that community to go take Latin at Sentinel, and then maybe going over to Hellgate to take something else, and I'm losing that community. That's a great point. And that connectedness is my kids.
So,
I think it would be committees to weigh in specifically on the question that you posed. More reasonable means to make a strong recommendation to the board that deep and extensive research about the pros and cons of making that kind of decision be done long before the decision is made. Because this committee is saying we really believe that we need to strengthen technical and career education. It's coming up from that. That isn't just a matter of words. That's a matter of resources. And we really haven't said, nor has the board, because of course we haven't done the recommendation. But to do that, there's a great deal of research that should be done. And some, not just through the curriculum cycle, but to say, where are places that really have strong technical and career education programs or career development programs, and how do they work, and that sort of thing. And those are the elements that might influence some of the answer to the first question. So for us to say, we recommend it one way or the other on 3 schools, 2 schools, I think huge mistake.
My concern would be making a recommendation based on if there's not enough money, this is what we think we should do. I'd rather, things might be different at such time when the decision has to be made. And at that point in time, we might feel differently than we do right now, just because of increased knowledge or whatever. So if I'm not cornered, if I don't have to make that recommendation yet, I would rather not. That's just mine.
So, Seal, are you saying that the work of the future committee needs to go, is ongoing, maybe with recesses and
Yeah.
reforming with ad hoc
I
responsibilities?
do think so. And I think if the board, if we reached a point where it became apparent that the board did have to make that decision, then this group might want to reconvene and, or in the interim, maybe we've been reading and studying. I don't know. I hate to say, this is what we recommended and the board, and then our committee is over and done. And then 3 or 4 years later, the decision has to be made, and they're going to make it based on what we thought 4 years ago. That frightens me.
I was just saying that to be prepared and to have a variety of options with extensive research is also smart, because then you're not in a crisis situation when and if it happens.
Which is why, like Paul said, we might have it on, this committee might be ongoing, studying more in depth, as Chris suggested, all 3 of those alternatives.
I think we are kind of making a recommendation back to what we're saying with our survey here, that the priorities are the students, the priorities are the smaller learning communities. I mean, right there, you're saying that from that recommendation, if they read between the lines, you're saying you don't want to throw them into a school of 2,000 where they lose all that connectedness, without saying at point blank, this is what we want. I mean, we kind of say,
Well,
But directly contradicting that is a very strong point being made about the importance of the college prep curriculum and the diversity of electives. And that's exactly the question that Cheryl is posing to us, and it might be at some point 3 years from now a question that the board has to answer. We are either going to sacrifice this or we are going to sacrifice this. And what we're recommending here with this information is that we want to keep both.
So where does this leave a school that is, I mean, all the schools seem to be trying to start to implement some of these changes that we're seeing in our survey?
right.
Going to smaller learning communities or career academies or whatever, where does that leave us at the school level?
You know, my sense, that I thought that was the one that kind of came out the cleanest in terms of the way people weighed them, is that we would say, and as the person whose job it is to supervise the principals, I would stay in touch with them and they with their teams to make sure that they are moving towards smaller learning communities and devising systems to make sure each child is well known. Got to pay attention to that. That's important now. If you can't, you got to be there. And the good news is we got some grant money to help people do that. Sometimes we don't get to do. We say do this and do it on the fly, but at least this time we have some money to support that. We also said increase the emphasis on career and technical education at the school level, but we also said that's an important district priority. The good news is, right now, Practical Arts is meeting and doing their work, but I don't think that's all of it. I don't think, as somebody was saying, that it can be restricted just to the practical arts, that we've got to get that career and tech focus, i.e. the career academies or whatever it looks like. We've got to get a whole school to embrace the idea that that's part of our job. That we have to support freshmen in transition, and that we have to establish and support academic recovery models. Now that's the new stuff. As Will said, you may not do that at the expense of your college prep curriculum. Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Last week I spent 2 days down in Kansas City. It was for a conference of the Career and Technical Education at the national level.
Yes.
Right now there's a big movement on nationally to bring career and technical education and the academic side of things closer together.
That's right.
Because research has shown that with increasing technology and how things are moving in our particular areas, vocational areas, that a student, in order to succeed in those areas right now today, has to be as well prepared as a kid that's going to go to college. And they're seeing very little difference in the preparation for the two. So
here's something to celebrate. We have to take those goddamn CRPs. And everybody in our high school building has to care about math and reading scores, and pretty soon science scores. And what that means is, when your department gets together tomorrow to talk about improving scores, you actually have to care about math and reading scores. So you are absolutely right. There is a convergence going on. And we heard that from the people that spoke to us about jobs, that our career and tech ed just can't be where it's not the place that you send the kids that are having a hard time getting through school. And our regular ed stuff can't be divorced from the career and tech ed piece of this. You are absolutely right. We are going to be seeing more similarities between the career and technical education experience that our kids have and what we used to call the core curriculum experience. I don't disagree with you. Smaller learning periods might well be organized around those things. Absolutely.
if we do our job the way they're advocating right now, and I've got some information coming, we haven't gotten it all gathered together yet, but I'd be more than happy to share it, at some point in time. But a student that graduates from Missoula County Public Schools, I don't care which one it is, but down the line, 3, 4, 5 years, those students will look exactly alike, or they should look exactly alike if we're going to prepare them the way we need to.
And, I have a couple questions, but one is even NCAA requirements look exactly like our honors requirements anymore. So the quote, dumb jocks have to be as prepared as those honors and accelerated kids. And you can't skip out of the last 2 years of high school. Yeah. But my question is, okay, say 5 years down the road, we're just having to slash everything because we don't have the money. What is the priority? Are we going to say choice, or are we going to say small learning communities and campuses? I think somewhere we have to say which one's going to be more important at this point, because whoever's making those decisions later, I don't want them just. Sometimes I feel like there's no research considered in some of the decisions that are made. And we've researched, we've looked at the research. I don't want it all forgotten when it comes time to reality.
Well, and so perhaps, one way to respond to that is to say, here's what we know right now. And one of the things we know is that this group must continue to meet, and this group must continue to get regular public, student, teacher feedback so that there exists an internal body that will make informed current recommendations to the board based on the circumstances. Right now the legislature is meeting. Who knows? Maybe they'll decide all $400 million extra dollars should go to schools. Maybe we won't have to worry about this ever again. But they could easily also go the other way and land, so honestly, rather than, because you're right, if we were to make that decision today, based on what we know about career and tech ed, based on what we know about where federal funds are coming to, maybe we are premature in making the specific detail of choose A over B before they have to choose A over B. If we start saying to them, pay attention to career and tech ed, pay attention to making sure that our kids are well known. Right now, those things are critical and important to us, and the kids have choices in their lives. You make sure that that's going on, and they can read. You make sure that's going on, and you support that stuff. Right now, they can do that. They might have to hit A against B to a small degree, but I think maybe we say we need to continue to meet, and we need to, because to tell you the truth, the consensus that was necessary for the decision that the board made 2 years ago at the elementary could not have been reached 5 years earlier. And so, I can tell Candy's story.
I'm confused. Are we then, is our work a framework for decisions in the future, or is it a roadmap?
Well, since we're not the board, I think it's a framework.
Okay.
But I don't know that, because you're right, that's the question that you're asking. That's really what it comes down to, framework versus roadmap. And I think the board, by job description, gets to write the roadmap. But, that said, they can write the roadmap by saying, you guys call that shot, and we support that. So I don't know. Yes?
In visiting with some people, there's a lot of schools around the country that employ full-time grant writers. Some school districts even have more than one. And what's caused that to happen is they get tired of being dependent upon what the legislators do and so forth as far as the funding. And so there's grant money galore out there if you go out. And we found that out with our smaller learning communities grant that we've got, which is considerable funding. And has our district really seriously considered moving in that direction so that we might be going after grants to
we go
enhance our
after grants all
education?
the time. We go after grants all the time. We used to have a half-time grant writer in the school district early on when we needed to balance the budget and other positions and stuff. As a result, what we've had to do is collaborate. We write and receive millions of dollars in grants every year. Some are not competitive. Some of them you get if you just do the paperwork. Some of them are competitive, like the smaller learning communities. Many of them we write in conjunction with the county. Peg Seal at the County Office of Planning and Grants actually does much more work for the schools than she used to do. Interestingly, when you collaborate with those outside agencies, the real direct focus in the classroom is rarely the kinds of grants that you can go in conjunction with those community agencies. In terms of stuff that goes directly into the classroom, the federal grant packages are shrinking, and the numbers, at least the number of them, is shrinking. There's big money for little tiny things, and we did a funny thing on this when we went out on a limb and paid, how much did I pay? $9,000, I think, to someone to write this grant, the Smaller Learning Communities grant, who's part of an organization that had 100% funding rate on that very grant. It was a risk, but it paid off. Some people still kind of laugh at it. It's what is it, $500,000 a year for 5 years? 12% of that goes to that company that wrote that grant for us. And they do our assessment for us. It's a lot of money. 12% to somebody that wrote the grant and does the assessment after we gather all the data in here. But 88% of that is money that we wouldn't have if we hadn't done that. So you're right. I don't think the board is saying you shouldn't go after those. We go after them as best we can. You're right. If you had a couple people whose job descriptions it was strictly to go after that, they'd be doing it differently. But it's interesting. It doesn't always match your need. One of my greatest frustrations with grants right now is that they pay for a lot of this, and we have to figure out how to do this. That's why we need the legislature to fund us, because this
the critical work that we do. We have a lot of money to do some of the extra stuff that we do. Part of the reason I'm excited about smaller learning communities grant didn't pay for any people to shrink the learning communities, but it paid for us to get organized to figure out how to do that ourselves. And I think that's how more and more grants are starting to work.
Are there grant writers that work on the commission?
That's exactly what happened with that. That's $9,000.
Oh, that is.
But they don't do like, there aren't very many people that don't do it where they don't get anything unless you get funded.
It's like, I'm thinking about a big organization,
Yeah.
which is even teachers that are not
Yep. Okay, yes.
I'm just curious, as they're going into the smaller community grants, how much collaboration between the three major high school sites is there? Because it seems like as the kind of decision that you outline looms on the horizon, that the level of collaboration between the three high schools is going to be the key in maximizing diversity, so that we're not all trying to compete. We're trying to say, okay, this school can take this emphasis, this school can shine in this emphasis, and really create choices as a jigsaw between the two.
To answer your question about how it's set up, the way that the grant is set up, there's frequent collaboration opportunities for our three schools plus the two schools in Great Falls that we want to grant grant. So that will happen frequently. The principals meet monthly with me. And so we add, but I still think this group also needs to be an ongoing piece, so that, because this needs to develop some of those frameworks and recommendations, and I think as things change and as questions come up, much like this group said, we need to ask the community some things. I think if I'm sitting on the budget team and we need some information internally, this is a good group to have as a standing group that you can call together, that's informed, that's read some stuff, that will continue to get homework assignments from me periodically to read some things, so that you stay as the informed folks that pretty quickly could coalesce around the topic and idea or question. Okay? So, the agenda, the agenda says, review the survey results, we did that. Prioritize the work, we've kind of done that. Begin developing action plans and recommendations. I'd like to propose that what I do is take the work that we did today and send that out to you in narrative form. And that before we get back together, and that narrative might be, here is what this committee would present to the board, and here is what this committee would say to schools, and here is what this committee believes we still need to do. And that all three of those would actually be presented to the board. And then if the board says, then those pieces go to schools, and then this committee has their task work still to be done. In my stuff about what this committee needs to do, there are some ongoing pieces that we send to them. And that we use that narrative then to develop our plan and strategy about how we're going to make those next presentations to the folks and then at our next meeting. So we'll make that January for the next time. Maybe with not quite as specific a recommendation as many of us recommend or thought might have happened when we met first. Does that sound reasonable? Okay? People, everything sounds reasonable at 6 o'clock. Ben, go for it. Any other items from committee members? Any public comment?
Well, this is my first time using a camera, so thank you. So if you see this on TV, I'm not sure if it's going to be on MCAT, but it may be, so you might see yourselves. But I guess I'm just concerned about the actual public being involved in this decision-making. There is this community conversation group, but the actual public has not even, they don't know what's going on. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I don't hear what you guys are talking about. Being in these little groups limits whoever does come, they don't know what's going on. And I did see the list of the community conversation people. One was a relative of a board member. There were many principals. I loved the principal's input, but it just wasn't a community group. Two of the people were on there, I think, due to a conflict of interest. There were members of private schools that are interested in buying one of our schools. So I'm just concerned about this whole process. And I'm concerned about Hellgate closing. I would sure appreciate more time, for such a huge decision. And again, the public needs to be more involved. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Any other public comment? All right, thank you all very much for coming.
Feel better.
But I think about it every day. Have a nice Christmas. You too.
Yeah, because when I did this. Okay.